A teacher is biased and shows signs of discrimination in a high-pressure classroom, but there's a twist that no one expected. Long-simmering prejudices are about to be exposed. Get ready for a story that will make you ponder what really goes on behind the classroom door. The classroom door closed as the bell rang, signaling the start of class. At Eastview High School, Ms. Taylor stood in front of the literature classroom, her stern eyes scanning each student in the class. When the children were in position, a tense atmosphere enveloped the classroom. A familiar feeling of insecurity seemed always present. Along with her lectures came hidden tensions as the slowest students hurriedly hid their anxiety behind calm faces. In the doorway, Lena Harper appeared, her heavy backpack slung over her shoulder. The eyes of the students in the class immediately turned to her. Some people are curious, others are cautious. Miss Taylor's lips pressed into a thin line as she saw Lena walking toward the empty table. Miss Taylor spoke up, her tone sweet but with a hint of hypocrisy. "It seems our class has just welcomed a new member. I hope you can keep up with our rigorous curriculum." The way she emphasized the word rigorous made her doubts clear. Lena looked straight into her eyes, not avoiding her at all, but also not saying a word. When Ms. Taylor returned with the board, the atmosphere in the room had changed. A silent storm seems to be brewing just below the surface. Tension spread throughout the classroom. What happens when a prejudiced teacher confronts a student? Prejudice confronts the quiet strength of students, and Lena's next step could change everything. Ms. Taylor cleared her throat, her eyes sharp as she watched the students gradually settle back into their seats. "Lena, today we will discuss the themes of power and oppression in To Kill a Mockingbird. Who wants to start?" Her lectures came hidden tensions, as the slowest students hurriedly hid their anxiety behind calm faces. Her eyes scanned the classroom, intentionally avoiding Lena's raised hand, instead calling out to a few other students. Finally, Miss Taylor looked at Lena with a reluctant smile. "So, Miss Harper, do you have any comments?" "Contribute something?" Tom stood up straight in his chair. His voice monotone. "I believe the novel showed how systemic racism. Ms. Lisa," interrupted, her voice dripping with condescension, "I think you are confusing this classic American novel with some modern political agenda." A feeling of discomfort spread throughout the classroom. Some students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others smirked eagerly in anticipation of the drama unfolding before Tom's eyes. Taking a deep breath, her fingers curled around the edge of the table with all the strength needed. Tension rose, Lena's jaw stiffened, her eyes never leaving Miss Taylor's face. Although silent, Lena's posture clearly showed implicit defiance, making the teacher even more confused. Miss Taylor turned around and continued toward the whiteboard. The marker hissed as she wrote, "Now let's discuss the main themes the author wants to convey. Can anyone tell me about the symbolism of the mockingbird in this lesson?" One after another, Miss Taylor ignored all of Lena's attempts to raise her hand to participate. Every time Lena raised her hand, the teacher's eyes passed over her as if she didn't exist. The message became clear: Lena's voice was not welcome in this classroom. Gradually, the students in the class began to realize that. Some exchanged uneasy looks, their discomfort growing. Meanwhile, several other students imitated the teacher's attitude, smirking and mocking Lena. Lena's frustration was evident in her shoulders and the tense expression on her face, but she remained calm. Her pen moved steadily on the notebook, taking notes carefully. It was Lena's silent act of resistance, a refusal to stay silent or be pushed out of school. As the class gradually ended, she remained steadfast in her determination. Miss Taylor announced about a group project. "I will organize the groups to make sure that no one feels left out." The implications of her words hung heavy in the air. Lena's eyes narrowed slightly, recognizing the challenge behind them. Understanding the situation, Lena straightened her shoulders and looked straight at Ms. Taylor, silent but determined. When the bell rang, signaling the end of class, students began to leave the room. Lena slowly packed her things. Her every move was careful, not rushed. As soon as she walked out the door, Ms. Taylor called back, "Lena, just a single word." Lena carefully kept her expression neutral. "Yes, Miss Taylor." The teacher smiled, a thin and sharp smile. "I hope you understand that in this class we only focus on facts, not personal analysis or opinions. I don't want to see you have difficulty just because you can't separate your emotions from the curriculum." Lena was silent for a moment, then replied with meaningful calm, "I completely understand, Ms. Taylor. I look forward to the opportunity to demonstrate my analytical abilities in the next discussion." She turned and walked out of the classroom, leaving Ms. Taylor standing and watching. A moment of insecurity flashed across the teacher's face. But soon, Miss Taylor's hesitation hardens into cold determination. She will show Lena who's really in power, no matter what it takes. The next lesson will be the ultimate test, where Miss Taylor's prejudices are exposed and Lena's strength is tested like never before. The next week, Lena walked into class with a confident posture, ready to face anything. Ms. Taylor stood in front, squinting as Lena sat in her seat. The atmosphere in the classroom was as tense as a piano string. An underground storm seemed to be boiling just below the surface as the class began. Every look and gesture of Ms. Taylor focused on Lena, preparing for what was to come. Lena became the center of scrutiny. "Lena, are you chewing gum?" Miss Taylor shouted, her voice so sharp it could cut through glass. Lena put her hand to her mouth. She wasn't chewing gum at all. "Miss Taylor," Lena began, but the teacher immediately interrupted. "Don't lie to me. Spit it out now." Miss Taylor's voice was filled with contempt as she gave orders to the young girl. Lena's classmates seemed uncomfortable. Some avoided looking, while a few others watched with interest. Lena stood up, moving slowly and carefully towards the trash can. Lena pretended to spit out the non-existent piece of gum and returned to her seat in heavy silence. The room became stuffy as the lesson continued. As Taylor's behavior becomes more and more obvious, she begins to scrutinize Lena all the time. From Lena's handwriting to her sitting posture, everything was under scrutiny. Frankly speaking, Lena, this is not a place for you to be as comfortable as the park, Ms. Taylor said, ignoring the fact that Lena's sitting posture was no different from her classmates. Lena's frustration was evident through her clenched teeth and fingers tightening around her pen. She took a deep breath, trying to keep her composure as she continued to be criticized. The atmosphere in the classroom began to change. Some students, like Emma, sitting in the front row, started throwing sympathetic glances at Lena when Ms. Taylor wasn't paying attention. Meanwhile, other students, encouraged by the teacher's attitude, joined in with giggles and small comments during group discussion. Lena raised her hand to contribute, and Ms. Taylor gave a cold smile. "Lena, please enlighten us with your unique perspective." Lena's voice was steady as she began to present, but Ms. Taylor almost immediately interrupted. "Sorry, but can you be more specific? We don't all understand certain types of language." A collective gasp rang out in the classroom. Lena's eyes widened, her hands clenched under the table. The discrimination that was previously hidden is now clearly exposed, naked and unsightly in front of everyone. When the bell rang ending class, Ms. Taylor called back, "Lena, meet me after class. We need to talk about your attitude." Lena walked towards the teacher's desk, her heart pounding but her face still focused. Ms. Taylor looked up, her eyes cold. "I hope you understand. Your attitude is becoming a problem," Ms. Taylor said. "If you cannot adapt to the standards of this class, perhaps you should consider a more suitable environment." Her implications are heavy in the air. Lena took a deep breath, her voice low but determined. "I understand, Miss Taylor. I will continue to do my best like I always do." As Lena turned to leave, Ms. Taylor said loudly, "Lena, don't forget that your group project presentation is next week. I hope you are well prepared." Lena nodded. While her mind was confused, she knew that the presentation would be a turning point. Miss Taylor will not miss this opportunity to humiliate her in front of everyone. But Lena is determined not to let her teachers get that satisfaction. When the day of the presentation arrived, an atmosphere of excitement rang out in the classroom as Lena stepped up to prepare to present. Little did she know that Miss Taylor had been waiting for this moment to launch her sharpest attack. What happens when prejudice and strong will collide in front of the whole class? Lena took a deep breath, steadying herself as she faced the gazes of her classmates. She has spent a lot of time preparing for this moment, determined to prove herself, despite Ms. Taylor's constant belittling. Behind Lena is the project board, which presents her detailed analysis of To Kill a Mockingbird, focusing on themes such as racism, injustice, and moral courage. As Lena began her presentation, Ms. Taylor narrowed her eyes, her lips curled up in a smug smile, like a predator waiting for an opportunity. Ms. Taylor's pen tapped lightly on the grading board. The other students sat restlessly, feeling the tense atmosphere in the class. Midway through the presentation, Lena stopped to answer questions. Almost immediately, Ms. Taylor's hand shot up. "Miss Lena," she drawled, her words laced with sarcasm. In a deceptively sweet voice, Ms. Taylor said, "I'm really curious about your choice of focus. Do you think I overemphasized some aspects of the novel?" Lena frowned slightly, but kept her tone calm. "I believe the theme of racism is core to understanding the message of the book, ma'am." Ms. Taylor interrupted sharply. "I know exactly what the author wanted to convey. Harper Lee made that clear. But what I want to understand is why you seem to have difficulty assessing broader literary values without being influenced by your personal biases." A collective gasp rang out in the classroom. Lena's hands tightened at her side. The composure she carefully maintained began to show signs of cracking. "I don't believe my analysis is biased, Ms. Taylor. I have supported each argument with evidence and scholarly sources." Miss Taylor moved her chair vigorously. The sound of her chair scraping against the floor was heard, and she stepped forward to stand between Lena and her classmates. "Let me make one thing clear, Lena. This constant emphasis on race is not only wrong, it is disruptive to the learning environment," Ms. Taylor said. "Perhaps at your old school, narrow interpretations like this might have been acceptable, but here, we expect a higher level of academic rigor." Silence covered the room. Some students looked down at their desks, avoiding Lena's eyes, while others watched with a mixture of horror and curiosity. "I'm wondering if you have what it takes to handle the curriculum at this level," she concluded. Lena's eyes sparkled with tears, but she still refused to back down. Lena stood her ground. Miss Taylor, I really disagree. The theme of racial injustice in To Kill a Mockingbird remains as relevant today as when the book was written, and to ignore it would go against the author's intentions. Miss Taylor snapped, that's enough. Your attitude doesn't seem very respectful. I recommend that you sit down and reflect on whether you are truly prepared for the academic standards of this subject. The class fell silent as Lena slowly gathered her materials, the heavy feeling of humiliation weighing heavily on her shoulders. A small voice rang out from the back of the class, but I think Lena's presentation was very good. Miss Taylor turned around, eyes narrowed. And what do you know about literary analysis, Mr. Thomas? Perhaps you would like to be detained with Ms. Lena Harper to discuss your academic shortcomings, she continued, causing the student to shrink back in his seat. Miss Taylor was effectively silent, then turned back to where Lena was still standing. What are you waiting for? Sit down so we can move on to the next presentation. Lena plopped down in her chair, her face burning with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. She felt the eyes of her classmates watching her, some sympathetic, others seemingly amused. The injustice seemed about to overwhelm her, but Lena forced herself to breathe slowly and evenly, while Ms. Taylor called the next student up to present. Lena's mind was confused. She knew she couldn't let this continue, but how could she? The teacher had all the power, and if she spoke up, she would probably only receive more humiliation. Still, a hidden determination was slowly forming within her. This wasn't over. Lena sat there, her mind filled with thoughts of justice and retribution, as if something was about to change. The classroom door opened, and Ms. Taylor looked up, a smug smile on her lips. With a smirk, Ms. Taylor announced, I have an important announcement. Her voice was artificially sweet. I decided it was time to hold a parent-teacher conference to discuss Ms. Harper's performance in class. Lena's heart pounded, a mixture of fear and determination spreading throughout her body. She knew that her father would stand up for her, but the thought of him confronting Miss Taylor made her nervous. The other students exchanged glances. Some are worried, others are curious about what's to come. Ms. Taylor continued, not realizing the storm that was slowly brewing just outside the classroom wall. Today, I asked to meet with Ms. Lena's parents after school. I'm sure they'll want to know about her disruptive behavior and below-average academic performance. As these words left Miss Taylor's mouth, footsteps echoed from the hallway, steady and purposeful, the sound growing louder and louder. The whole class seemed to hold their breath, waiting for something to happen. Something important is about to happen. The footsteps stopped just outside the door, creating a potential pause. Then, a loud knock broke the silence, causing Miss Taylor to frown, clearly displeased at the interruption. Come in, she called in an unhappy voice. The door opened, and a tall man in a formal suit walked in, his presence immediately attracting everyone's attention. A wave of recognition spread throughout the class. It was Mr. Harper, the school principal. Lena's eyes opened wide, surprise mixed with relief evident on her face. She glanced at Ms. Taylor, who now also recognized the connection between the newly arrived visitor and the student she was targeting. Mr. Harper entered the room, his gaze quickly scanning the faces before him, and pausing for a moment as he assessed the atmosphere in the room. Lena sensed a slight flicker of anxiety between the two of them before he turned to Miss Taylor. Ms. Taylor's expression was neutral, but Mr. Harper's posture radiated authority. Miss Taylor, he said, his voice calm but with a hint of firmness. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Ms. Taylor immediately responded, trying her best professional smile. No, Mr. Harper. We just finished our lesson on To Kill a Mockingbird. Is there anything I can help you with? Mr. Harper nodded, his eyes now focused entirely on the teacher. Actually, I heard that you requested a parent-teacher conference about one of your students. Miss Taylor's smile widened, clearly pleased to have her authority recognized. Yes, I think it is necessary to solve certain problems before they become more complicated. Mr. Harper nodded and asked, so who is the student you want to discuss, ma'am? With a neutral tone, Ms. Taylor nodded toward Lena, making a dismissive gesture. Actually, Mr. Harper, this has nothing to do with you. Of course, she believes that a Chinese American like Mr. Harper cannot have a relationship with his student. Ms. Taylor chuckled softly at that idea, not realizing the tense atmosphere that was covering the entire classroom. Mr. Harper's eyebrows raised slightly, a very slight sign of reaction. Miss Taylor, I think perhaps we should discuss this further privately, he said. Miss Taylor nodded eagerly, imagining that she was about to receive support from the principal. Of course, Mr. Harper, I am happy to share my concerns about Ms. Lena Harper's attitude and presentation. As Ms. Taylor began to pack up her materials, Mr. Harper turned to the class and said, everyone, please continue with your lesson. You can focus on the assigned reading. The whole class quietly looked at each other, some eyes turned to Lena with surprising curiosity. A reassuring smile appeared on the corner of Mr. Harper's lips, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes. Lena sat up straight, feeling a wave of confidence she hadn't felt in weeks. Miss Taylor, completely unaware of the true nature of the situation, led the way out of the classroom, and Mr. Harper followed, pausing briefly at the door to look back at his daughter. The gaze they shared held strength and determination, and as the door closed behind them, excited whispers began to echo throughout the room. Students leaned across the table, guessing what was about to happen. Lena remained silent, her eyes glued to the door, knowing that justice was finally about to be served. Even though the door was closed, they could still hear echoes from outside. Ms. Taylor's confident voice gradually turned to confused stutters as Mr. Harper's calmness took over her entire demeanor.